False Awakening Suite was written with two purposes in mind. One of them to open up the album and be the first thing that you hear when you start the album, to kind of set up what's about to follow. And the second being using it as a live opening track. So when we play live, before we walk on stage, we traditionally have some piece of orchestral dramatic music to bring us on. We've used different soundtracks, things from movies, from Inception and Psycho and other things. So we decided to write one ourselves, so that'll end up being our opening music to bring us on stage, and as I said, it starts the album off, kind of gets you in the mood that something big and dramatic is about to happen. The Enemy Inside is a song where we wanted to write something that was very fast-paced, technical, energetic, kind of gives you this sort of anxious feeling, and that's what we went into. That's the headspace we kind of went into that song with. It was written fairly early in the process, and the song ended up being our first single, the first taste that the public got of the Dream Theater album, and our first video as well. And it deals with post-traumatic stress disorder, and as it applies to our veterans who have seen really horrific and horrible and traumatic things in the face of combat, and who come home and are afflicted with this disorder and can't really adjust back into society, and are plagued by something you can't see from the outside, but it is definitely an enemy inside that they live with. Very unfortunate. The Looking Glass, for me as a guitar player, it's very different because on the record I used my Music Man signature model guitar in the whole album. That's the sound of the album. That's that big, sort of bold in your face guitar sound. For that particular song, I used another Music Man model that's called an Axis, and it makes that sound immediately, the sound of that song sound different. Also, I used Mesa Boogie amps all on the album, mostly the Mark V, but for that particular song I used a Royal Atlantic. Again, different, more like a rock, grinding, more traditional sound. So to me as a guitar player, when I hear that song come in on the album, it sort of stands out as being sonically a bit different. And the attitude behind that song was to really create a big kind of arena rock, powerful riff that was in a major key, which is always a challenge to do, because sometimes when you do that, it doesn't end up sounding powerful enough. It could sound wimpy and everything else. So that was a fun song to write, and I like the mood of it, the way it kind of contrasts with the rest of the album. Enigma Machine is the instrumental on the album. Technically, there are two instrumentals, with False Awakening Suite being the introduction, but as far as an instrumental standalone song, it is Enigma Machine, and we went into this album knowing that we wanted to do that. We haven't done one since Train of Thought's Stream of Consciousness, and we thought it would be fun having Mike Mangini with us, being able to feature him as a drummer, giving everyone a chance to shine. There's like bass breaks, drum breaks, keyboard solos, guitar solos, and we also went in wanting to write a very thematic instrumental, so something that was less of a technical exhibition and more of a song as far as structure. And the idea that we had in mind was this kind of spy theme, Pink Panther vibe, and so there's a little bit of comedy thrown in there as far as the musical themes. The bigger picture is sort of the the centerpiece of the album. Not only where it's placed as far as it literally being in the center, but just kind of the way that if you were to listen to the album from the beginning, it slightly starts to shift the mood. After Enigma Machine, which is a big, heavy, sort of dark instrumental thing going on, this provides a bit of sort of melodic relief to that. It's the side of Dream Theater that we like to portray, that's a bit more sensitive. It kind of comes down to points of just piano and vocal, piano, acoustic guitar, vocal, and really features James. To me, is definitely one of his shining moments on the album. From the opening verse to the way that he sings the choruses and everything, I think he really soars on it. There's a guitar solo that's in the middle, which is not so much a solo, it's more of a melody, but that's an example of a track that was done while we were writing it that we ended up keeping. And because of the process of the way that we recorded this album, we were able to do that in many instances. Keyboard solos, drum fills, drum grooves, guitar breaks, entire bass performances, things like that. And I think they all contribute to making the album feel very much alive and breathing. Behind the Veil is, to me, it kind of stands out on the album because it's the type of song that has so many different elements within it. It starts out almost in this kind of like new agey sort of way with the intro synthesizer piece, but then it gets into like, a very Metallica-ish, riff-driven type of song. At the same time, it has a very proggy instrumental part. It has, for me, one of my favorite solos on it as a guitar player. Something that was a lot of fun to do, and it also has a very big and melodic chorus. So it kind of has like all the elements that we like to put into a song. And the subject is speaking about how there's people in the world that really do very horrific things, unspeakable things, and somehow justify that behavior. And in this instance, speaking of people that will kidnap, there was the story of the guys that took those 3 young girls and kept them for 10 years. And you hear stories like that all the time. In the case of the chorus, Behind the Veil, coming from the story of the Utah girl who was taken from her home and literally with her abductors in the city, in the town, walking around, but nobody knew it was her because she was wearing a veil. Anyway, it was inspired from a lot of sort of horrible instances like that, but it kind of brings to light the fact that there are people out there that think this is perfectly okay, and the courage that those people have to, the people that are captured or captive, need to summon up in order to get themselves out of those situations. So the bravery that's involved as well. Surrender to Reason was the first song that we wrote when we got together in January, and to me, it has a lot of energy and a lot of spirit to it when I listen to it. It will always bring me back to that moment when we were in the studio and we're sitting there as a band with Mike Mangini for the first time in that creative environment and process with us, and that was the first thing that sort of came out of us. It has a really cool moment that I love every time it comes up, where it's one of the songs where the bass is featured, and the type of bass sound that Richard got is just really aggressive, really in your face, way more up front than a lot of our previous albums. And there's a point where, right before the guitar solo, where John sets up the solo with the drums, and it just gets into this really great attitude. And I did the kind of guitar solo that reminds me of just being, late night, smoky bar, just going for it, just playing the most ripping, attitude-driven kind of solo, and it's just guitar, bass, drums there. And eventually it just builds into the final chorus there. It's one of my favorite moments on the album. Along for the Ride is, again, thinking of the album as a complete piece, if you were listening from the start to the end. Along for the Ride is almost like the breather before the grand finale. It's a kind of a point of reflection on the album. It's a song that I had written the lyrics before the music, which is not usually the way the Dream Theater does things. 99% of the times it's always music before. But this was a phrase that I really liked, and some words that I had started jotting down before the song was written. Then I kind of picked up my acoustic and had the basic shape of the song, the verses and choruses and everything going into the studio. And when I brought it into the guys, we developed it into what you hear it today. So it's a good example of having somewhat of a more developed idea and seed, taking that in, and then collectively working on it, and having, through like a synergy, making the collective result just way more than what I could have imagined. And again, it does provide that bit of a breather moment before Illumination Theory, which is the climax of the album. Illumination Theory is the final song on the album. It is the grand finale of the whole thing. It's the ending battle scene of the movie. It's one of 2 songs on the album to feature real strings. The whole middle section of the song is a real string section we recorded at the studio on Long Island. False Awakening Suite also has real strings as well. And the interesting thing about this song, it's obviously the longest one on the album, and the way that we wrote it is we kind of like had it storyboarded out before we even began, knowing that we wanted the middle to be, as you hear it, with the band dropping out and just having the strings, knowing that the big thematic start was the way the song was going to begin, knowing that this sort of again, thematic outro was going to happen, and then just sort of working on the curve of the song from there. We had a great blueprint and storyboard for the song before we went in, and we wanted it to just have everything. We knew we had the time to stretch out. We knew we wanted to write a song that would be around 20 minutes or so, and so we took advantage of that. So there's plenty of moments to stretch out. There's plenty of solos. There's lots of different vocal moments that are kind of intertwined with the music, and it just kind of takes you on this journey. Lyrically, it has to deal with really reflecting on what are the things in your life that you live for. What are the things in your life that you'd be willing to die for? And not for everyone, but are there any things in your life you'd be willing to kill for? And the answer to those 3 things are different depending on who you talk to, and where they are in their lives, and what they do, and how they grew up, everything else. So the song really explores those 3 questions, and it's fun to do. I can't wait to play it live. It's going to be a blast, and I think for us it's definitely one of the highlights on the album.